So, good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, and we are going to start today's session of the EU Resilience Landscape. It's our first session of the resilience cycles. So, my name is Matthias Kelmer, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. I'm working as at FEDEREN as project manager. FEDEREN is the European Federation of Agencies and Regions for Energy, Climate and Environment. And I'm coordinating the activities with regions within the Resilience project. And today I have the honor to moderate these interesting sessions. Before we start, I would like to introduce you to some housekeeping rules to allow all of us to have a smooth meeting. So first, the microphones are disabled upon entry, so we don't have any disturbances during the presentations. If you want to speak, you will have to raise your hand and we can allow you to unmute during the Q&A sessions. Primarily, we are going to use Slido, and you see the small icon on the top where you can address your questions during the presentations, and we will read them out and ask them to the presenters right after this one. We also will use Slido for some interactions and to get you on board and have an active exchange and not a monologue from our side. You can also put on your cameras if you have a stable connection. Otherwise, I would recommend to switch them off. The chat is opened, but we will not be able to answer the questions that are raised in the chat. So therefore, I will guide you back to the question and answer session in Slido. Please also note that this meeting will be recorded and made available on the Resilience website. This was already stated in the registration, and we will also, if you don't want to be seen on the video, I recommend to switch off the camera. So what are we going to see today? We will have a short introduction from my side and a welcome. Afterwards, we will have a presentation of the EU Resilience Landscape from Johannes Klumpers, DG CLIMA, followed by a short Q&A session, and afterwards a presentation of the Resilience and the First Adaptation Mission Project Cluster by Jole Lutzu. In the second block, we will have a presentation of the Mission Implementation Platform for Climate Adaptation by Richard Smithers, Project Director of the Mission Implement MIP for ADAPT at Ricardo Energy and Environment. And we also have a very interesting input from the Covenant of Mayors of the Policy Support Facility by Alison DeLuise from Covenant of Mayors Europe. But first, I want to start with Slido and get used to this tool. And therefore, I've prepared a couple of questions that you will be able to answer now. Okay, so I will continue. I will do a short introduction on what is resilience and the open training sessions. We have foreseen 2 cycles of training sessions, and we are at the moment in the first cycle. So we will have a couple of sessions on what is the European resilience landscape, how to start with pathway development, what are good examples of pathway developments, how to structure the process of becoming climate resilient, and which tools are available, and give an input on tools, and also a session on barriers and risks. This aims to raise the awareness of what is existing, can you get help, and how can you get support. And during this first cycle, you will be able also to let us know what you are interested in most in getting to know of in the second cycle. So the second cycle will be rather focused on solutions and sectoral approaches, on good practices from regions for regions, and sharing knowledge and also enabling skills to boost the resilience. So like citizen engagement, stakeholder engagement, concrete nature-based solutions, and give you an input on this. At the end of today's session, you will be able to, within one Slido poll, to let us know what you want to, what you're highly interested, what you would like to have as the first sessions within the second cycle, and which topics are most relevant for you. So that is something that will come towards the end. Now, as we are in the first cycle, we know from different surveys that the regions have all different needs and challenges, facing different starting situations, but there is definitely the need for knowledge and for support, for financial advice or research or cross-border cooperations, but not all the needs are the same for all the regions. And the same is the true for the challenges. So we know that sometimes financial resources are lacking, sometimes it's the political support or the citizen support that is missing. And within the Resilience project, we try to support regions. We cannot support all the regions. Within the project, we have got 7 focus regions and approximately 20 regions from our sister projects we are working with together. But we are not the only ones who can provide guidance and support. There are European initiatives and European mission projects that also offer support. And they also help to structure the process. For example, with the adaptation support tool, there's a clear way how to work on adaptation. So basically, these initiatives and projects try to help to structure and to support in the end, and support the regions in becoming climate resilient. Within Resilience, we try to come up with a first evaluation of which project or which initiative can provide support towards a specific need or challenge. I'm totally aware that this is not a full list of what the projects can do and what the initiatives can do, and it should give the first help towards where to find support. And with this, I want to hand over to the person who most likely knows most about the European landscape on climate adaptation, Johannes Klumpers. Johannes is a senior expert at DG CLIMA and head of the Secretariat of the Climate Adaptation Mission. He's in charge of the coordination of the activities related to the mission adaptation and will now give us an insight on the adaptation strategy and the role of adaptation from the European perspective. Johannes, the floor is yours. You should be able to share your presentation.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Thank you very much, the organizers and participants, for the invitation. And I will indeed try to share. I see a share button, so hopefully at one point that will work. Sometimes I am somehow stupid with it, and I never know exactly why. Is that looking nice on your screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Fantastic. Well, participants, dear colleagues, we know that 20 of March, the IPCC has agreed on the synthesis report of the 6th assessment cycle. What is available right now on the IPCC website is already the synthesis for the policymakers. And it is clear that when you look through that synthesis, that it has, I believe at least, never been so strongly having chapters and elements that relate to climate impacts and that relate to adaptation. So climate resilient development, that is a term that the IPCC has used in their press release, is getting well, I think to none of us this is surprising, but it is definitely clearly getting a much higher attention now than 10 years back from the IPCC. And the IPCC report and the synthesis and the recommendations to policymakers and so are not yet fully analyzed by DG CLIMA, but I know that already discussions are going on at the top level in the Commission. What kind of reaction or how will we need to position ourselves towards it, and whether additional kind of suggestions will come by the Commission as a reaction to that report. So that is a general. I think you are all aware of that work, and of course that influences also us here in the European Commission, and it will take a little bit of time to see what exactly the approach will be to that. But in the meantime, let me maybe just draft the picture of what we are right now busy with in DG CLIMA and in the Commission when it comes to adaptation to climate change. You all know, and that is not new to you, that we have the EU adaptation strategy since 2021. Those of you who are working in the one or the other mission project or are part of the consortium having now in the process of setting up the mission implementation platform, you know that the mission on adaptation to climate change is a element in that strategy. It is intended to help faster adaptation, more systemic adaptation, smarter adaptation, because it of course also is very much about improving our knowledge. Now, the mission is not the only element, obviously, in this adaptation strategy. There are many of them, and there are many working groups in the European Commission and between the services looking at those different factors, and that is a work that is ongoing all the time. So to make ourselves coherent between the different Commission policies, and I can give as an example that DG Reform, so that is the Director General that looks into administrative performance in administrative standards, administrative reforms in the European Union. They have, for example, as an outcome of this EU adaptation strategy, set up a technology support instrument, they call it, whereby member states can actually ask for support in improving the administrative approach and on many issues, but also, and that is I think a novelty. DG Reform did not work on that earlier, but they have also now had a specific what they call flagship initiative on this technical support instrument for adaptation. So to help member states to actually manage and administer properly the actions that are necessary relating to adaptation. So that is just to give you one example what the internal work of the Commission can then lead to. And in that particular case, that internal idea then also becomes externally visible because of this TSI instrument and the invitation to member states to make use of it. And many member states have made use of it. I myself have reviewed the Portuguese application for it, which, no surprise, was focusing a lot on wildfire management. Good. Now, the EU adaptation strategy is from 2021, and the climate law was actually adopted later. And so to some extent, the climate law adds additional elements to what was already agreed and hinted at in the EU adaptation strategy. And the climate law strengthens the role for adaptation. And what it also describes is actually a requirement that we all together, so member states and the European Union, that we are to ensure a continuous progress on adaptation. So that climate law introduces actually an obligation to not only work on adaptation, but actually to increasingly becoming better with it. Also, that climate law reinforces the reporting on adaptation. There have already been through the governance regulation and the energy and climate plans have already been some reporting on adaptation, but that is intensified through the climate law, and member states do now report, and we will also have to report, and we will also have to make an assessment of our own activities in the European Union, in addition to the member states' activities. And the member states' first reporting are now coming in, and will be now. We will start now, also with the help of some of you who are present here in the meeting today, who have a role in assisting the Commission in the analysis of these reports. So we will that analysis now will start, and it will lead to an assessment document on those national reports. For those reports, we have also, in order that this is a little bit supported and helped, we are in the process of issuing guidelines to member states, and they are right now in an inter-service consultation within the Commission, and will then afterwards be presented. I would like, before I go to the mission, I would also like to point out another activity which keeps us quite busy, and not only us, but also very much so the scientific community in Europe, and in particular the European Environment Agency, who leads on this EU-wide climate risk assessment. You might wonder why do we need that in addition to what the IPCC is doing? And that is probably a valid question. What we try to achieve with this EU-wide climate risk assessment, because there has been never any EU-wide climate risk assessment done. There have been national assessments, and there has been global work by the IPCC with reports on Europe and other continents and so on. But we, as the European Union, have never carried out a EU-wide climate risk assessment. Of course, that risk assessment will take into account and will certainly not contradict what the IPCC assessment round 6 comes up with, and it also builds on previous work by the Joint Research Centre, by the European Environment Agency, by the member states, but it will, and that is what makes it different to any other exercise. It will clearly make a link also to the EU policy initiatives in the field of adaptation, and to what extent we can say or not maybe that these policy initiatives are fit for purpose or need, or whether they're, so there's a kind of assessment appreciation of these also in that EU-wide climate risk assessment. So this will normally come out in spring 2024. And 2024 is certain. Spring, I will not guarantee that. But the idea is that from then on, it would be actually repeated every 5 years. Meaning that this one next year, that will come out next year, is a kind of starting point, a kind of baseline. And then 5 years later, we will again make a new assessment. And it goes without saying that this EU-wide climate risk assessment, EUCRA is the acronym that we use for it very frequently, that this will be a core input also to a renewed modified adaptation strategy that will come at one point. Now, I would also, of course, like to say a couple of words on the mission. We have had many things have happened in the last 3 months on the mission. We have had the contract signed with the consortium that will build up the mission implementation platform. And I will not say much about that because we have Richard from that consortium in today's meeting, and Matthias is also part of the consortium, or Federin, and some other of the participants that are here today. I will not say much about that, and I leave that to Richard and others maybe to talk about that more. But that is one thing that is important and has happened in these last months. Then there is a lot of work now in that build-up process, getting the platform and its activities up and running. Then what also has happened and was published on March 7 is that we have now a final list of regions and regional and local authorities that have signed the mission charter. I must admit that when I say final, we all thought that it was final when it was published on 7th of March, but there is still the one or the other region that said that unfortunately they were late with sending through the signed charter, and they didn't have enough time to get the signatures or these kind of things. So we might get a couple more. But in principle, the deadline was, of course, closed, and we cannot do that forever. Yeah, so we are looking into some of those, so that it might go up from what we have right now, 302, to maybe, I don't know, 306 or 7 or something like that. So it is not massive, but there are a couple. As you can see on this slide, and I'm not 100% certain whether that now is totally correct, because this map was produced before March 7, and I have not changed it in this presentation with the definite map. So I'm sorry for that if ever there should be a mistake in there, but roughly it is correct, that picture. It shows that you have countries like Portugal, Denmark, Spain, France, the Netherlands to some extent as well, Belgium, that have a very high proportion of their country, Poland as well, where there are signatories. You have then a couple of other countries where it's 50 or less % covered, and then you have countries like Germany, that is always very visible here because it's in the middle of that map, and you see that you don't see much. At least that is how it looks like when you look at it. But what one should not forget is that there are two things. This is the geographical representation, but what it doesn't show, this map, is how many people are represented by it. And when you then look at Germany, then German participation is a little bit different, because among the signatories is North Rhine-Westphalen, which is the most populated land in Germany. And there are also other strongly populated signatories like Hamburg, München, Bremen. And so if you take all of this together, actually it's 25% of the German population that is represented by these signatories. Which is less than 40%, because we believe in the calculation we made that all of this represents roughly 40% of the EU population, these regions that have signed the charter. And it is now an obligation on us, and a welcome obligation, I must say, to work now with these regions, and go along with them, and on that way to becoming more resilient, and to define the actions necessary, to find maybe the finances necessary, which is for everyone always an issue, a big one, but also to know what to do exactly is not easy in many instances. And we really hope that over the years, this community of 300 plus and with all the other institutions that will help that community, that we will get to a club of willing and that we will make progress, all of us together. Now, this is something that I leave maybe more to Richard to talk about. The platform hopefully goes live on roughly around beginning of April. What is, I think, for our regions, the most important aspect of it is not so much that there is a beautiful website where you can read all kinds of things, but what they want probably most to see is that they actually can now start to request maybe technical assistance, or that they can start benefit from those services provided by the platform that we have announced that they would be able to get. So that's why that aspect, I think, to me at least, is almost the most important, more important than maybe the nice looking website, although that is also important. And one, I think most people, we know that you can do a lot of damage by presenting something which is not mature, and then you need to gain your reputation again. But still, I think having the regions being able to actually signal their interest in getting advice and getting assistance and so on, that they can do that this community of practice can be established through registration and all that, are important aspects. And in April, we should be able to make that for the regions. Just as a reminder, community of practice is having, of course, the regional and local authorities. There are also the Friends of the Mission, which include research institutions and other solution providers. Maybe not many right now, but that will maybe come more over the coming months and years. There are projects. These projects will, that's at least the purpose of why they have been set up. They will identify solutions, they will develop them, they will make them available, and so on. So that also, that picture includes projects that are funded through the mission, obviously, as well. They can come from Horizon Europe, they can come from LIFE, and they can come from Interreg. These are three areas that we have identified funding programs. There might be more. There is also the normal structural funds, so the non-Interreg structural funds, which we have not yet really developed how to systematically bring that into the mission. Matthias, with that, I would stop. I saw there was at least one hand raised already. Maybe there are more.
Yeah. Thank you, Johannes. Yes. I wanted to repeat, maybe it was not the easiest way to find the Q&A. I also posted in the chat that you can go to slido.com and state with the code from the chat and go to the Q&A and post some questions. So far, we have one question in the Q&A session, and I would go ahead with this one. Do you include these developments? How do you link it?
I am actually not quite sure, because the EU-wide climate risk assessment is a quite large exercise. I would think that this would be part of it, but I cannot guarantee it, as I'm not myself involved in the definition of the various chapters and so on. I know there are 35. I've shown that on a slide, and I would think that the civil protection mechanisms and not only the European Union one, but maybe even also the national civil protection mechanisms, and that civil protection is part of the assessment. Sorry that I cannot be clearer on that, but I can try to come back on this question later by a reply that I can provide later.
Yeah, thanks. That would be nice. Then I would include it in the follow-up also.
Yeah.
To the participants. Ewing, I think you should be able to unmute yourself, please.
I was. Thank you so much, Matthias. My question is actually pretty straightforward, and it's also based on some experience that we've made in previous EU projects. Following the map that I saw that the region in Germany that was willing to sign the strategy was exactly the ones that was most affected by disaster, I think, in the last few years. And whereof there seems to be a little bit more resistance in other German regions, but and also this might be true for the regions in Italy where there's a higher tendencies for earthquakes to strike and so forth. So is it assumable that countries or regions are willing to sign these strategies following either like a, let's say, if there's a national priority that is set, like we see it in Spain and Portugal, or if they have a close proximity to disaster which they experienced and where the topic is fresh in the news? And yeah, is there something we can learn from that? I mean, is that assumption correct from your side, or and you know, how does that enable us to let's say move people to actually adapt to that strategy?
I would guess that you are right, that this has an impact, generally speaking, on that regions and local authorities that have been really severely impacted by forest fires, drought, floodings, and so on. They are more inclined in general they are pressured much more than others that have not yet experienced maybe heavy disturbances. It's not although that signed the charter. For example, when you look at Germany, yes, you have North Rhine-Westphalia, but the most heavily impacted was Rhineland-Pfalz, and they have not signed. So it's not one-to-one. But Portugal is definitely not a surprise that this is so strongly interested, because maybe that is not known to everyone, but in 2017, it was, if I recall correctly, 610,000 hectares of forest that burned. And that is, if you compare this to the Belgian forest surface, which is 800,000 hectares, something like that, it's an enormous amount of forest that burned in 2017, with quite a number of deaths, and it was clearly an experience that shook. That was something that made many of them move and wanting to be active. So I think there is that link, Karsten. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I would go ahead with the questions in the chat, or Bart, do you? Yeah, I will go ahead with Bart. A second question from the attendants. You should now be able to unmute yourself. Okay, and until then, I would go ahead with one question from the chat. How will the Commission avoid duplications between the many projects? I think.
I mean, there is a general requirement in the Commission to avoid duplication, unless duplication or replication rather is wanted. So there is a mechanism by which in the Commission there is always, when there's a new wave of projects that are evaluated and that are in the process of being looked at, whether they should be getting funding, where services are consulted. So the Horizon Europe program does that, the LIFE program does it, and so we see these lists, and we are then asked whether we are aware that there's overlap or duplication. Now, this is I am almost certain that this is not without mistakes, that sometimes there is overlooks and so on. But when it comes to adaptation work, one purpose of the mission is, of course, also to actually really get a good overview and also give advice to the various regions to either use the one program or the other, depending on what they really are looking at and depending on where they, what kind of activities they feel they want to do and they feel comfortable with. So I hope that over the time with a mission, at least when it comes to the question of adaptation, that we get through the mission a very good view on who does what and in what program, and duplication is to be avoided, but replication is actually something that I must say that we even have invited in certain calls that there should be solutions or demonstrated approaches that could be replicated in other areas, which doesn't mean that for the replication you then would get EU funding again or something like that. But it is not, I mean, when it comes to implementation, doing things twice or three times is not necessarily bad. Claiming 2 or 3 times money for doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same place is wrong. And that is something that we absolutely need to avoid. And if that is meant by duplication, I can only say that this is something we do want to avoid. Absolutely.
Thank you. I think we have the time for maybe 2 more questions. Bart, you should now be able to provide a statement if you like to, but please be rather short with your question. Okay. I'm sorry, then, yeah, I will go ahead with the questions and you can state it afterwards towards us and we will try to answer it in a follow-up. The question that is highest ranked is the EU also considering to include adaptation targets within the national energy and the NECP's process?
As far as I know, not. But I am not a specialist on that area. I am not aware that we have clear targets there, like exact figures in terms of CO2 reduction on the mitigation side. I mean, you have these clear numerical figures. I am not aware that this would be envisaged for adaptation.
So maybe I would skip the one on the assessment and the impact chains and maybe relate it also to the follow-up later on. I think, Johannes, if you can also answer this question together with the first one, that would be great. And rather ask the later one, how can cities from regions that haven't signed the charter participate?
How can cities and regions that have not signed the charter participate?
Participate, yeah.
Yeah. So when the word participation can mean many things, and I'm not always certain how exactly it is meant when people ask. You can, of course, always participate in any Horizon Europe call, in any live call, and in any Interact project, as you always did. You do not need to sign the charter for that. You can do that. It follows the rules of each of these programs, and you are absolutely, there's no link with the charter, with having signed the charter. Now, where there is a link between those who have signed the charter is there are certain services that will be provided by the mission implementation platform that will not be available to regions that have not signed the charter. But these are not projects. I mean, these are services of a couple of days, maybe, or a couple of hours in certain cases, and they are not projects. So when it comes to participating in projects, So you can become a participant to the mission if you want, even without having signed the charter, but because you participate in a project that is a mission project. Right now, we do not have yet so many mission projects because this has yet to be established exactly. We have 4 projects which we consider mission projects. Well, the one we have here today, the Resilience, is one of those 4. They are the oldest mission projects. Then we have now a couple of Horizon Europe mission projects that come from the first Horizon Europe mission calls. They are mission projects. And we have identified, and I do not remember the number exactly anymore, also a couple of other Horizon projects that we consider mission projects because they are dealing heavily with adaptation in regions that have been, for example, coming up before the mission was actually starting. And they are also will be invited to participate in some of the events that are organized around the mission. And then the same for LIFE and Interact projects. Of course, there are many LIFE projects that don't deal with adaptation, but there are quite a number that deal specifically with adaptation and in regions, and the same for Interact. And so they will also be considered part of that mission. Also when there is future new, for example, strategic integrated projects in LIFE that deal with adaptation, they will then be added, just like the future Horizon Europe mission projects that will come from future calls. And in that way, people or regions or organizations will also participate in the mission, although they have not signed the charter.
Thank you, Johannes, for your time and for your great input and insights on how how DG CLIMA is coordinating also between the world global level and the member states and the regional level. And thank you for your time, also for answering the questions. And the pragmatic answer from my side also to the last question, how you can participate, is you're already participating in the mission basically within following our today's event, and you can also join all the upcoming events that are also basically under the mission or under the umbrella of the mission organized. So thank you, Johannes.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and have a nice day to all of you.
Thank you. Bye. And now we will continue with the next presentation, and Jole is going to focus on the work of Resilience and the linked projects Asinoe, Impetus, and Transforma. You will get an insight on the achievements and on the overview of useful tools and solutions from Jole Lutzu. She's officer in urban resilience and climate adaptation at ICLE, the European Secretariat, the Network for Local Governments and for Sustainability. So Jole, please go ahead.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you very much. And good morning to everyone. I will try to share my screen. Just please let me know if you can see it full screen.
Yes, it's perfect.
The full presentation, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, as Matthias mentioned, I will be here on behalf of the Resilience project team, but also on behalf of the other 3 projects, Asinoe, Impetus, and Transforma, to provide you a bit with a brief overview of the work that we have been doing for the past 1.5 years. As Johannes also mentioned, we are the first adaptation mission project cluster that started last year. And so I will try to explain a bit the journey so far that we started in strict cooperation with the other 3 projects in support of the European Green Deal targets, but in particular to the new European strategy on adaptation to climate change and within the mission goals. So as you can see here is a bit of the overview of the 4 projects, Resilience acting more as a coordination and support action with the objective to support the design, testing, upscaling of the solution that are currently being developed within the 3 projects, and here granted as innovation actions, but also as to follow up on what Johannes mentioned, to ensure that replication is happening of the solutions, especially providing tailored support to additional group of regions that will engage within resilience. As you can see here, we have RCNOE led by the University of Thessaly that will focus on 11 case studies coming from different regional areas and subnational local governments, providing an ecosystem for climate change adaptation solutions. Impetus will focus on all 7 European biogeographical regions, also supporting the implementation of adaptation led by EURECAT, and Transformar with 6 case studies, so some 6 regions, European regions, as a focus more on water-related risk and hazards. So for 6 lighthouse demonstrators that will test the solutions that will be developed. And yeah, here just a bit of zoom in and deep dive on what they will touch upon. So as I mentioned, RCNOE will base their work on system innovation approach, and they will gain climate innovation window platform that will be co-created and co-designed by the stakeholders involved in the project. Impetus will provide a framework on multi-sectoral, multi-scale, and multi-impact solution, taking advantage of the resilience knowledge boosters that is currently under development with the aim to align different governance levels and adaptation policies, integrated adaptation policies. Transformar, as I mentioned, will establish a transformation adaptation process and set up of the innovation ecosystem to ensure a pathway selection through the demonstration of region-specific portfolios in its case studies. And here, Resilience will, as I mentioned, try to foster replication of the solution, the adoption of the regional climate resilience pathways within the regions, but also support a wider dissemination of those within the most impacted and low capacity regions that are engaged within the project by involving regional authority and key stakeholders in those areas. Here you have all the links to the project website, so if you want, you can take a look and get a better understanding of what they are doing. Here, I wanted to show you a bit of the geographical coverage and reach of the projects. So if you go to this link on the Resilience website, you can access to this map, or you can also scan this QR code. I hope it works. And as you can see, we have mapped all the regions covered by the 4 projects, and it covers a large part of different European areas, including some of the outermost regions such as Guadeloupe, La Réunion, Madeira. And so you can click on these different pinpoints to access to the different regions information, but you can also navigate a bit the different information provided by filtering them through the addressed Sustainable Development Goals, clicking here, or by the key community system that each demonstration case study addresses through their activities, and this list relates to the one provided within the framework of the Mission for Adaptation. So on the left side, you can also go by project. So here you have this filtering, as I was mentioning, so filter by the key community system. You can look into water management and get all the regions that are addressing this aspect. And on the left side, you can also filter the information by region, by project, and look into the specific regions that are involved there. So as an example here, for example, you can see you can have a different number of information, the local project partner that is involved from that area, the resilience topic or sector that is mainly addressed, some key facts and background on the region, on the current state of the art of the region within climate adaptation and resilience, but most importantly also some information about what is expected in terms of results and ambitions that will be hopefully reached through the activities that are planned. So again, I invite you to go to the link or scan the QR code to get access to this map and navigate a bit what kind of information are there. And so here, within those regions, with all these demonstration case studies, a different set of activities are being developed, as I mentioned, and here we have an overview of these activities that are somehow clustered across the 4 projects and with different focuses, with different scope. And we tried also from Resilience to kind of recollect a bit this information to help you navigate this information based on what can be of your interest. So we can start from a series of activities that are more focusing on analyzing states or latest developments, as for example, vulnerability assessment for a city or for the region. So a high number of activities falls into this realm, but also into more information related. So some activities that are delivering information to certain target groups, like creating or setting up a climate innovation hub. Other kind of interventions that are more related to the resource infrastructure management, specifically on water. A lot of case studies are dealing with this topic, and in terms of decentralized water management, or for example, implementing a stormwater management system and other different kind of solutions. Into the infrastructure realm, there's also a big focus on soil from different case studies. So activities that deal with building or upgrading soil-related infrastructure and soil management in particular. Other kind of monitoring activities, for example, flow rates, water quality in the river, or other kind of factors. So a big group of case studies are also developing this kind of work streams, supported by software, website, platforms, apps that can also kind of reach a larger audience. For example, create a citizens app where information on certain climate impacts is showcased. As well as creating networks and nurturing and establishing networks is a big part, an important part of this for projects, to ensure that the work that is being developed right now can go a bit beyond of the lifespan of this project. So establish this network in a way that that replication goal is actually reached and can continue over time. Other kind of activities that refer more to mapping information into a geographical space, but also, a key part is providing access to capital and funding. So different kind of action related to setting up a regional fund where small-scale projects can apply and be implemented. So this kind of work is being done across the 4 projects, in relation then to developing a plan or a strategy on adaptation, for example, with a focus on coastal regions. And last but not least, a big part of work is being done into the installing sensors for data collection in certain areas. So yeah, this is a bit comprehensive overview of what kind of activities you will find. Definitely, you can get more information on the website on the specific area. but also through those activities that I just presented, specific technical tools and innovative solutions are being delivered. Here you can see a list that wants to compile them a bit also in relation to the climate adaptation support tool, because we can see that the main purpose of this list is to also enable the European Environmental Agency to identify which tools could be then integrated into the platform. So to prepare the ground for adaptation, assessing climate change, more identifying and assessing adaptation options, to finish with the implementation and the monitoring and evaluation activities. So we have kind of listed tools in relation to these steps, but also as the overall goal, try to create co-creation, synergies, avoid duplication, but actually foster replication and the uptake of tools by not only the 4 projects, but other projects or initiatives at the European level. So we can I will not go through the whole list, but we can definitely refer to some of those just to give you a glance of what is there. I'm looking at the RCNOE data catalog that will try to set like a single place for collecting and hosting all the data sets together with the metadata that will be generated, produced, or used within the case studies in the RCNOE project, but actually will provide a user interface that can be accessed also by external users that can navigate the different data sets, upload their own, and filtering the information. The Resilience Knowledge Booster is also an exploratory tool developed within the Impetus project that aims to share data and knowledge across the regions to foster that cross-learning process and support the elaboration of climate pathways and select adaptation options. In relation to that, we also have the playbook of transformational adaptation that also wants to establish itself as a step-by-step guidance to co-develop and co-design climate resilience adaptation pathways that will be tested within the demonstration regions, but also would like to kind of provide a guidance for engaging stakeholders, which content to include, but also what kind of outcomes need to be looked for. And last but not least, from Regilience, we have developed this maladaptation self-assessment tool that actually provides a checklist for the region to self-assess the maladaptation potential of their actions that are currently planned, to take into account and factor some of the risk where actually further action would be needed to ultimately avoid maladaptation. So this is a bit of an overview, and if you access the website, you can find definitely about more. You can find about more of these tools that are either already developed but under development. And a bit of a focus on the funding opportunities tools that is also try to get a bit of a clarification for regions to navigate the immense and complex landscape of funding opportunities at European level, because besides the political support at European and national level, also financial support is available through various sources to support regions in developing climate resilience pathways. And so this tool would like try to map a bit what is there, but most importantly, guide regions through understand which actors, sectors, or kind of requirements are needed in terms to find the best and most appropriate funding sources for what they are aiming to do. So I apologize for not putting the QR code or a link here, but I'm sure, Matthias, that all this information will be then shared with the participants. So you will receive all the necessary links, but basically if you go to the map link, you can then go to resources and you will find either all these tools, but also the leaflet on the funding opportunities guide. And one last thing I wanted to share, one of the key activities that is developed jointly by the project is also in terms of communication and wider dissemination is the joint newsletter, the Climate Resilience Post. So here we periodically publish latest developments, activities, articles, but also opportunities where you could kind of engage with. So if you are not subscribed yet, I would invite you to subscribe using this link or the QR code. And yeah, that was a bit the overview that we wanted to share from Resilience and from the projects. And I will leave it here, but I'm available to answer any of the questions. And I think also some representative from the other project, if they're here, they could jump in and provide a bit more background on their own activities. We'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, thank you, Jole. And we will start with the questions. So the first question is, do the regions under your CSA project have access to projected scenarios? I would assume that some of them have not experienced impact from climate change yet. I'm looking at Jole, but there might also be others from our sister projects who would like to respond to this question.
I can respond for our, Amal is also here, but for our 7 regions that we engaged this year, some of them may have this access, and we'll definitely look into what can be provided to them in terms of support to further develop this within their own context. But I will also leave Amalie from Transformar to respond from our side.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for the interesting presentation. So I'm from the University of Antwerp and we're coordinating the Transformar project. So regarding the scientific projections, our partners at CMCC, the Potsdam Institute of Climate Change and E3M are in charge of these projections. And at least for our 6 demonstrators, as Jole mentioned, are focusing on water-related risks, are already seeing the impacts of climate change, and they have already presented projections on, for example, sea level rise, temperature and precipitation in our regions, and they have been, for example, presented in workshops in the past year to stakeholders in these demonstrators on both past impacts of climate change as well as the future impacts. So at least in our case, we have these ongoing, and there will still be work ahead on this. I'm not sure if CMCC or PIC are here. Maybe I see Oscar is here, so if you would like to add something as well on the Transformar side, go ahead.
Oscar, I think you should be able to respond.
Yes, so in terms of Transformar, we have a high degree of diversity, although we are all focused on water-related impacts. All 6 demonstrators have different problems altogether, and they attend primarily different key community systems. So one of our priorities has been to assess current and future impacts of climate change, and you can see that they are also using their own resources. They are communities that have been already been involved in other initiatives of maybe not of this kind, but that can be useful for what we're doing. So there's a big deal on integrating resources from past projects and the resources from the institutions that take part on this project. So you can see a high degree of variability from one to another, but the main features are the same. And that was one of the priorities that we've been developing so far. And we can say that all 6 demos and not only have been sensing the impacts of climate change, but are fully aware also of the scenarios for the next decades. So definitely, yeah, they are really aware of the problem.
Thank you. And I might add from the Regilience side, we are also working on protection of hazards for the regions we are working with. Yeah, we will do an indicator analysis of what the most likely hazards and the amplitude of the impact will be for our focus regions within the Regilience project. University of Lisbon is at the moment working on the method how to elaborate from existing data the outlook and projection for the future for our regions. And with that, I would also go to the next question: which challenges are the projects facing with promoting solutions in the regions? And Amelie?
Yeah, I can start. So in the Transformar project, we have 5 types of solutions, and all in all, we have 21 solutions. So we have technological, nature-based governance solutions, finance and insurance mechanisms, and behavioral solutions. So for the moment, our challenge does not so much relate to the promotion of solutions. It's more about getting them tested and demonstrated, and in a sense after that upscaled. So at the moment, it's getting the right stakeholders involved, really setting up how they should be put together in the context of the demonstrator. And then once the project goes ahead, then we will face more of these promotional issues. But now, from what we see from the people in the various demonstrators, there's a lot of interest involved. People want to see the solutions once they're more aware of the risks that are facing their regions. So in that sense, the promotional issues are not there in the way we see it at the moment. So there's more interest than issues going. But of course, it takes time. There's 21 solutions, so there's a lot of work involved. So for example, we're building, one of our partners is building the Citizens app as well as we have Resilience Index, some nudging experiments going on, and nature-based solutions. So involved in urban stormwater management. Yeah, we have a lot of different things. So it's more about getting them up and running.
Okay. Oscar, maybe also no quick reply.
Yeah, just really quickly to add on what Amelie said. For what we saw so far from the point of view of engaging stakeholders from local communities, is not that they are not aware or they don't want to participate. What they want to achieve with Transformar and similar initiatives in this cluster is to have a sense that they can be part of the process, that they can be supported throughout the implementation, and that they can have access to resources that the European Union is putting for them. So it's more a challenge not of engaging them, but to keep them engaged throughout the project. And that's where we have to focus right now.
Thank you. And maybe we can have a quick reply on the last question. This is comforting, but is there a link to the IPCC scenarios or something that can be used by EU regions in general? I believe there's a knowledge gap.
Yeah, there is a link, and this data, the projections that are prepared by CMCC and the PIC Institute and ETRM will be made available publicly, so that they can be of interest and used by EU regions in general. So we're currently in discussions about how and where to put this data, but it is coming soon, and we will keep you updated once we have it there available for all.
Thanks. And I think there I can relate to our climate resilience post, the newsletter of our joint projects. So you can definitely stay updated on this process and be the first ones to get to know where this data will be made available once it's done from our side. with this one, I would stop the Q&A session here and thank you all, Amelie, Oscar, and especially Jole for presenting the projects and the project cluster in general. And also start with the next topic. Our next speaker can build on more than 30 years of experience in climate adaptation. He has been working for numerous countries and authorities to support their climate resilience developments. Richard Smithers, the project director of the MIP for ADAPT project, will now give us an insight on the latest developments of the Mission Implementation Platform for Climate Adaptation. So Richard, the floor is yours. I think you can share your presentation and unmute.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matthias. Hang on one moment and I'll see if I can share.
Yes, looks good.
Okay.
Perfect.
It's the old thing. I can't see any of you.
We're there. That's fine.
Yeah. Great. So many people have joined. Great. So many people have joined from such a wide range of places. Yeah, I'm project director for the Mission Implementation Platform. Still really thrilled to be doing this job. We're still very much in the early stages. We started in January and we're working at high speed, really behind closed doors at the moment. You'll all get to hear more really, or see more of what we've been doing in April. But one of the reasons I'm so thrilled about the platform is actually the team itself. It's led by Ricardo Energy and Environment. As Matthias says, we work across the world helping countries, regions, local authorities develop adaptation plans. We've worked extensively with the European Commission on development of the EU adaptation strategy and a lot of things that go with that. We're joined by Fresh Thoughts, who've done so much with regard to climate adapt over the years, and who are involved in Regilience. You'll all know Guido and Thomas, I guess. We've got iCatalyst, based in Spain, real thought leaders in citizen and stakeholder engagement, also involved in a lot of work on nature-based solutions and so on. Federine with Matthias and Elodie, and Joannium, who are responsible for TRAMI, the project that seeks to coordinate across the 5 EU missions. So really great team. Now it won't move, Matthias. Oh, here we go. Okay. So the Mission Implementation Platform, we had to give it a handle. We've called it MIP for ADAPT. So MIP for ADAPT, it reports to the Mission Secretariat. The Mission Secretariat actually comprises people from DG CLIMA, DG RTD and CINEA. Ultimately, we report to the Mission Manager, Clara de la Torre from DG CLIMA, and the Deputy Mission Manager, Philippe Torkens from DG RTD, and our contracting authority is CINEA. Our objectives. We're here to provide central support to all mission participants and the Commission to enable you to implement the mission. We coordinate the broad range of activities that all those people do through a community of practice. That community of practice will become real in April, and I'll tell you more about that. We provide support and technical assistance to the Charter signatories and projects that are involved in regions and local authorities who are involved in mission projects along their journeys to climate resilience. We communicate and connect activities and actors involved in adaptation through a media strategy and through an annual forum, and I'll tell you a bit more about that too. We monitor and report on progress inevitably, and we're here to promote and stimulate engagement across the missions with the adaptation mission. You saw this slide already. It was within Johannes's slide pack. I mean, it's basically about the way we've organised ourselves as a team. We've got 5 facilities. You see them there across the top. And really, I think in terms of coordination, actually one of the immediate things I would draw out, because it came up in questions earlier, is we are here very much to facilitate alignment between the relevant EU-funded projects that contribute to the mission, particularly the mission projects with a capital M and a capital P. We're here to help identify complementarities and synergies, ensure coherence of all we do with all you do, because I know many of those projects are here today listening in on this webinar. We've already met Pathways to Resilience. We're meeting them again on Friday. I'll tell you a little bit about them as we go on. We're obviously closely involved with Regilience and its 3 sibling projects, both through this, but also we're involved in the Green Deal Support Office, so we already had good links with those. And we're seeking to meet up with the other key projects over the coming weeks in the very near future. The Community of Practice facility, I'll tell you more about. The Technical Assistance facility, I'll tell you more about. Communications and events, I mean, I think the main event really is the annual forum that we will organise this year in Sweden on the 12th, 13th of June. It's there very much to take stock of the mission's progress and give everyone an opportunity to exchange views and input on its direction. And a monitoring and evaluation facility that links up heavily with EEA, because EEA doing so much on that front too. The whole brought together in an IT environment with EEA, within Climate Adapt, really important, Europe's one-stop shop for adaptation information, a fantastic resource for tools and guidance, and we will provide a front end for that, as it were, for regions and local authorities with the EEA. In terms of the community of practice, then we already saw Johannes's slide. Perhaps this gives you a little bit more detail. There are the charter signatories, all 306 of them, mission projects from the mission's Horizon Europe calls, but to be honest, there are lots of other projects that are so relevant, projects from EU Life, projects from Interreg, actually past projects from Horizon 2020, some of which are still live. Government national contact points for climate adaptation, and there are normally 2 or 3 of those within each member state authorities and institutions more generally, and European institutions, and friends of the mission, currently a few dozen, including from the private sector. So the community of practice, really, it is a self-help. It's intended as a self-help network, an opportunity to engage with one another, to share knowledge and experiences, share good practices, develop good practices, participate in events of all sorts, opportunities to link up on research, link research with policy, link research with practice, link policy with practice. Broadly speaking, we're going to organise it in 3 nodes, 1 at the EU level, 1 between regions, 1 between those involved in research and innovation. But of course, the interactions between those 3 nodes, hugely important. And the community of practice will give the opportunity for people to set up lots of forums on their own particular issues. In terms of the charter signatories, and actually those regions and local authorities involved in mission projects, then there are an array of benefits. There's the technical assistance that we will provide through the core team that I've told you about, but provide actually through a network of 14 small organisations who are acting as member state facilitators, supporting regions and local authorities in situ. They are able to cover all member states and actually all languages. So a really brilliant resource. And there's the opportunities to network, as I say, and opportunities to participate in webinars, dialogues, trainings, forums, build your capacities and contacts and knowledge. So the technical assistance, well, the technical assistance we're looking to launch in April. It will be an ongoing call. Charter signatories and regions and local authorities involved in mission projects will be able to apply. There are 3 types of technical assistance. Basically helping regions and local authorities to use their existing climate vulnerability and risk assessments as a starting point to develop adaptation plans and to help them fund and implement climate adaptation solutions. We ourselves don't have funding, but we do know about funding. We know about funding available to regions and local authorities, and we can support you in that regard. I should say really that in terms of that support, we're looking to support 20 regions and local authorities between now and the end of the year, 80 next year, and 100 in 2025. In total, 200 regions. It's not a huge number. I mean, there are over 100,000 regions and local authorities across Europe. But when you see Johannes's map, you realise quite how important all of you charter signatories are in terms of the extent of your coverage and the extent to which you can act as catalysts, inspiring other regions and local authorities through all you do with our support, through all you do with support from the mission projects, who we can point you to, who can point you to us. I should also say, in regard to this technical assistance, it's important to keep your feet on the ground about how much technical assistance we can provide ourselves. You know, really, we're looking to provide 5 to 15 days of technical assistance on developing adaptation plans and funds and help you to find funds and implement. What that means is we're here to build your capacities, your understanding, your network, to point you to appropriate people who can help. We still see real opportunities to work in a team-like way, for example, with pathways to resilience. Or if you haven't got a climate vulnerability and risk assessment yet, to point you to CLIMAX, which is supporting 50 regions and local authorities in that regard. In terms of demonstration projects, then again, we're looking to help 200 regions and local authorities to identify suitable demonstration projects of their climate adaptation planning and to help them to access funding and financing for their implementation. We're hoping these will be large-scale projects ideally that span boundaries, you know, address issues with other regions and local authorities, promote coherence. Here again, we have about the same amount of time, 5 to 15 days for each of those, dependent on their population size. So again, it's a matter of thinking efficiently with both regard to this and the previous assistance that I mentioned. You know, we will be running training, we will be running joint events that bring regions and local authorities together. Finally, we're seeking to support regions and local authorities in engaging and mobilising citizens and stakeholders in helping with climate adaptation planning. Yes, somebody who's been involved in climate adaptation planning for many years now, for me, the most vital thing is to adopt a bottom-up approach, not seek to adopt a technocratic, top-down approach that lands up with a lovely document, but on the shelf, not used, not implemented, not understood. Actually, developing a plan with your stakeholders, with your citizens, building its salience, its credibility, its legitimacy, building ownership and understanding, building a commitment to implementation really is all. So, you know, you can hear my passion. I'm really enthusiastic about this particular technical assistance, and we will support a minimum of 50 regions and local authorities per year with that engagement, and we'll also support about 30 community level events per year in that regard. It may be more. And again, feet on the ground. We've got 2 days to support regions and local authorities to actually understand about engaging and mobilising, and just a day on the events. But you know, what we're doing right now is developing a do-it-yourself tool, that draws upon so many other tools, and really is there to enable regions and local authorities to help themselves, to help one another. And our support will be really helping you to understand that tool and how to make best use of it. It's not just about the charter signatories and local authorities and mission projects. You know, I do really believe there are benefits for everyone. I think there are benefits for all regions and local authorities, actually, in being able to look to these front runners, look to see what they're doing, be inspired, link up with them, learn from them. There will be the regional adaptation support tool on Climate Adapt shortly, initially in a static form. In due course, you know, it will continue to develop into an ever more usable form, but something that builds upon the adaptation support and the urban adaptation support tool, and really seeks to respond to the needs of regions and local authorities. There's all the resources and data on Climate Adapt. It's huge, sometimes overwhelming. We will seek to draw your attention to those elements that are really specifically relevant to regions and local authorities. There'll be the tool, the self-help tool, the do-it-yourself tool on citizen engagement that we're developing and how to use it. There'll be newsletters and publications and access to open trainings and webinars. So no one need miss out, really. Oh, sorry. In terms of the timeline, yeah, we've been going through January, February and March. It's a big blank on this timeline. I can assure you it's not a big blank. If I look tired, it's for a very good reason. If Matthias looks tired, the same goes. We're doing a great deal. We will launch the virtual site and its activities in April. Our aim is the 1st of April. I mean, that's Easter. It'll probably be just immediately afterwards, but that is really our focus. We are going to launch the call for applications for technical assistances. They'll be launched in April. They'll be ongoing. Regions and local authorities can put in their first application. We will use, systematic criteria to select who gets assistance first. Those who don't can continue to develop their application if they like over the months to the point when they do get assistance. I'm not suggesting that that regions and local authorities waste a lot of time in this. You know, you've got better things to do. But putting together an application that really makes the case is always important. And the website itself, concurrent with the community of practice and those technical assistances. Communication materials ongoing, really. And then the mission forum. I've said Sweden, 12th, 13th of June. Many of you will be invited. Really looking forward to it. Essentially focused around a one-day event, but there'll be a pre-event, a pre-workshop for members of the community of practice who are there, particularly the regions and local authorities, an opportunity to meet up and share ideas, input ideas on how we move forward. I've probably overrun. You've been extremely patient, Matthew, but thank you very much. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And I will, without any further ado, pass on to the next speaker. Alison DeLuise is currently working as manager adaptation to climate change at Climate Alliance, the European city network dedicated to fair and comprehensive action. With previous work experience spanning Australia, Africa, Pacific, North America, and Europe, she has spent the past 5 years supporting municipalities to build their capacities around addressing climate adaptation challenges. She's currently one of the coordinators of the Covenant of Mayors Policy Support Facility, and she will now give us an insight on this.
Good morning.
And Alison, the floor is yours. I will pull up the slides and you should see them in a minute.
Fantastic, thank you. And just to say, sorry, there seems to be a bit of a strobe effect of the lights in this hotel room I'm in, so I hope everyone's able to see okay. And while Matthias is pulling up the slides, I just want to say thanks so much for this opportunity to present at this first open training session. As I said, I'm Alison, and I'd also just like to give a shout out on this call. We've got Luca and Jole from ICLE and Max from Climate Alliance, who are all sort of co-coordinators of this policy support facility. That they're here today as well. So just really the presentation, I'm just going to give you a bit of context as to how the Covenant of Mayors Policy Support Facility came to be about, go into a bit more details about what the program is. Towards the end, I'll share with you a little bit of the current program resources and then sort of look forward. So thank you for sticking with us, the 85 of you still online. I realise 2 hours is a long time to remain seated. So Matthias, if you could please go to the next slide. So I think many of you probably know the Covenant of Mayors. We have over 10,000 signatories in Europe covering mitigation, adaptation, and a new sort of pillar called energy poverty, which has been incredibly important, of course, particularly in the past year or so. So whilst the numbers are great, if we start to look at adaptation, we suddenly see the numbers drop a little bit. We have about 4,000 signatories that have committed to addressing adaptation, but only about 25% have submitted full action plans and only about 13% monitoring plans. So I think we all know in the past to talk about adaptation was almost admitting that we'd failed on mitigation. The IPCC report that came out on Monday certainly gave a real nod towards us focusing a lot more on adaptation and resilience. And so whilst mitigation remains critical and we need to move in that direction, if we really think about centering equity and justice and vulnerability, we really need to start to work a lot more aggressively and actively and collaboratively on adaptation. And next slide, please. So the Policy Support Facility, in a sense, was a recognition. We're funded by, the Covenant of Mayors is funded very much by DG CLIMA and DG Energy. And in the past, I think a lot of our work was much more mitigation focused, and this recognition that we needed to embed adaptation more within the Covenant of Mayors led to the development of this 2-year pilot program, which started last year and continues until the end of this year, to really sort of see what could we do as the Covenant of Mayors to bring adaptation much more strongly and provide a lot more support to our signatories. So whilst some of the resources are for all signatory countries, we targeted 12 member states based on both higher exposure to risks as well as perceived lower capacities in addressing adaptation. And so those countries are on this screen. And we developed 4 modules. I'll go into more details about Module 2 and 3. Module 1 was really a series of webinars that I'll share the resources for later. And Module 4 is really about showcasing and sharing what are we learning. Obviously, this is a pilot, and so we want to make sure that whatever we're learning, we're putting into our sort of future Covenant of Mayors program, and also that some of these things are informing our partners, in particularly some of the partners that have already presented on this call. So next slide, please. So the timeline, again, we're very much in the middle of it all right now. You can sort of see that sort of March period, and as I said, it will end the end of this year. But as I said, what we learn will be embedded into the next phase of the Covenant of Mayors that starts next year. Next, please. So results to date, I mean, these are more output level indicators and certainly not impact yet, but, we've managed to involve more than a couple of hundred municipalities and regions so far. We've engaged sort of getting close to sort of 1,000 individual participants. We're developing a range of adaptation measures, which I'll talk about in a moment, around sort of some more technical assistance, which in a sense is sort of aligned a little bit with what Richard just presented. We've developed and implemented a range of national workshops, which again I'll talk a bit about more in a moment, and delivered a range of webinars and podcasts. So we're quite active and moving forward quickly. Thanks. Next. So the national workshops, really the idea of national workshops was about sort of sharing best practices within countries and talking about the 12 countries that we mentioned. So if you can move to the next slide, really the idea is that we wanted to co-design with a national partner in each of those countries, someone that really understands local context and the issues being faced by local authorities and regions, what were the sort of most pertinent topics that we could address within these workshops. And ensuring that there's no barriers to participation. We are holding all of these workshops in national language and using national experts, so that even the smallest municipality without necessarily English capacities are very much involved. We're specifically targeting small and medium-sized municipalities, although some workshops, yesterday we held the Italian one, and obviously the City of Rome presented, which is of course not a small municipality, but we want to make sure that smaller and medium-sized municipalities can really find a place for themselves within this adaptation space and start to learn what it is that they maybe need to do to make their communities more resilient. We are trying to, though, in these workshops also include regional and national partners, because we're very keen to create these sort of multi-level governance links and ensure that within each country there are really those sort of structures to sustain really great adaptation collaborations across the multiple different governance levels. And also finally within the workshops, we're really trying to make them interactive. Adults learn by doing, and so really trying to embed sort of a workshop element, very practical exercises. Next, thank you. So these next 2 slides really just show a couple of images of the workshops. We've, as I said, held 7 to date. This was the one in Portugal, really focused much more on sort of adaptation planning. And the next slide was the workshop we held in Hungary, which actually had really small municipalities engaged, some of just 1,000 people who were really sharing, despite limited capacities and finances, what is it that they're still doing to actually, as I said, make their communities more resilient. And they've been really fun and interesting and interactive experiences. So if you move to the next slide, there's still 5 more to go, and if any of you are interested, follow us on Twitter and we'll be sort of advertising how to register for those workshops. The Greek one's still to be determined. We're waiting to find out about the national elections and when they're going to happen, but the other dates are already on this page. So then just moving to sort of talk a little bit about technical assistance, we wanted to work with these municipalities, local authorities, regions to support them in implementing an adaptation measure. Again, a pilot, so learning how is it that we can do technical assistance in a way that's effective, efficient, and really supports these communities in moving forward on their adaptation plans. So if you can move to the next slide, thanks. We are working with 37 cities and regions in the program, 11 of them are which involved in the adaptation mission. So certainly overlap, but good overlap. I would say not duplication, but really sort of working together and making sure that the different initiatives really complement one another. Again, in the spirit of piloting, we've made sure that we've got small cities, mid-sized cities and large cities involved so we can understand what are the different ways that we must approach technical assistance in those places. And we have a range of different focus areas. Nature-based solutions is one of the biggest ones, not surprisingly. A range of ones. So if we move to the next slide, just again, two really quick examples. Oh, sorry, let me just jump one step backwards. What we're trying to do is actually support early stage measures. Sorry, Matthias, you can move to the next slide. It was me jumping ahead on my presentation. We're wanting to support them on feasibility studies, on pilot initiatives, on community and stakeholder engagement processes, and also this inter-municipal coordination and relationship building. And the idea here is that we provide two technical experts, one in the subject matter of which the measure is, so it could be nature-based solutions or disaster risk reduction, but also a governance expert, understanding that many of the challenges actually relate to governance and they're not always just about the technical subject matter. So they provide, I think it's something like 8 to 10 days of technical experience, technical support to these cities in implementing these measures. So yeah, you can move to the next slides and just to show you an example, this is in Cornelia de Llobregat, excuse the pronunciation if that was terrible, but they're developing these climate itineraries in vulnerable neighbourhoods, really focused on just transition. And on the next example we've got here, this one here is in Smoljan in Bulgaria, and it's a feasibility study for water surface drainage to prevent landslides. So again, really helping them sort of understand what are the processes they need to go through, providing that technical support that particularly smaller and medium-sized municipalities don't necessarily have in-house. And again, learning a lot along the way. So if we move to the next slide, we're learning lots of lessons and we would love to also be able to share them with things like the adaptation mission, if any of these are things that are of interest. Richard, available anytime to talk, but also the other projects. And again, we're really learning that mid and small size municipalities, as well as obviously larger ones, really want to understand how to better do this, but they're facing strong capacity constraints. We know that none of this is new. HR, financing, technical expertise in-house. Some of them are also, though, indicating this disconnect from sort of regional and national level, and we feel there's a real opportunity. Yesterday at the Italian National Workshop, we had 3 regions, so Sicily, Puglia, and Emilia-Romagna, presented on some really innovative and proactive ways that they are supporting municipalities, local entities within their regions to actually move forward on adaptation. And we think those are models that can be well replicated, and we would love to sort of play a role in helping promote that. So really, in all cases, we know adaptation actions have to be defined according to local needs and objectives. So while scaling is fantastic, context is critical, but we really need to accelerate implementation now. It's really critical, and climate change is here, and we don't have a day to waste. So just finally then, on slide, the next few pages, we've got some adaptation resources you can flick through, Matthias, because we'll be obviously sharing these, but we've got some webinar series, sort of short, I guess, summaries of these webinars we presented at the beginning of the program. So we've got 3 days of those, so the next slide as well. And then we have a podcast series that we're developing. We've already published 3 podcasts, and there's 9 more to go. The QR code will take you to all those resources. And then looking forward, so again, this is a pilot. So if you can move to the final slide, Matthias, what we want to do is we really want to incorporate these lessons learnt into the next phase of our adaptation programming, which will start next year. We want to support municipal adaptation capacity building. We're already doing that within the Covenant of Mayors, but look at how do we do it smarter? How do we do it more efficiently? But we also really want to support things like the Mission on Adaptation. So, you know, I guess you have 40% of Europe covered by the mission, which is fantastic, a major effort. And then how can we also, with our large number of signatories, look at maybe how do we take some of those products and help scale them further? Again, we're all in this in a collaborative space together. So the more that we can support, the happier we'd be. And I guess the final point is we really want to emphasize this sort of multi-level governance approach. So regions are really critical in the center between sort of national and local, and we feel that regions can play a really important role, and we'd love to be a part of supporting regions to do that. So I know I went fairly quickly, we're sort of getting to the end of 2 hours, and so I sort of sped through, but of course available for questions now also, of course, to Richard, and on the next slide is just the contact details should you wish to reach out. Again, the slides will be shared. But thank you so much, really happy to have been here today to present.
Yeah, thank you, Alison, and thank you, Richard, for your contributions. So as you mentioned, it's already quite close to the end of the session. So with this, I think we have still the time for one or maximum 2 questions to be asked to the speakers, if I refer to the time. If there are other questions, you can always reach out to me or to all of us, and we will follow up in a separate conversation. The first one would be, do you support NGOs directly who enable communities to develop resilience plans, or local authorities only in the regions? And
yeah, I mean, we are MIP Adapt itself is focused on charter signatories and regions and local authorities associated with mission projects. So the answer is no, but I pointed to the wider benefits. I don't know though whether Alison, your policy support facility does.
No, again, it is very much focused in sort of on local authorities and regions. But again, the materials and things like some of the national workshops, we've had NGOs involved. So the broader community is welcome. But in terms of sort of direct assistance, it's very much focused on the authorities themselves.
Luca, you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to reply directly.
Yeah. Thank you. So no, I just wanted to add on this point. I'm also working with Alison on the policy support facility, and I think it's a very good point. And what we try to do, and I think it's a very successful case to involve the NGOs. It's basically having them as national partner to organize workshops, and so from our side, funding them. In order to giving them an opportunity to organize this workshop, connect with local partners. So, and it's also connected to another question that I see. For sure, we learned that also having NGOs as our reference in the national context and making sure that they can build a link to understand better the needs, the local needs, to understand better the local context. I think it was key in our program in the policy support facility, and and this is how we tried, and I think also managed to install a collaboration also with this sector.
Thank you. One more question I think we can answer. Can I work with several of these initiatives and projects at the same time, or are these exclusive deals? And I think, Richard, you go ahead.
Can I? Yeah, because I'm really keen on this question. It's all about aligning. It's all about, I mean, Alison said it, acting as one big team, really. For example, MIP Adapt in seeking to coordinate. We can point regions and local authorities to other projects that can support on vulnerability and risk assessment. We can take over those regions and local authorities once they have vulnerability and risk assessments and support them through the initial stages of thinking through their adaptation planning and all they need to do and how they can build on that risk assessment. And then we can hand them over to Pathways to Resilience to actually provide further support. Equally, Climax can point people to us once they've supported them. Pathways to Resilience can point regional and local authorities to us. So I think we can act as a big team. we can't support the regions and the local authorities on the same things at the same time. That's the only thing.
Okay, thank you. And with respect to time, I think we will follow up in the other questions, and I will just take over the presentation for last time and say thank you again to all the speakers, and thank you, Richard, Alison, Johannes, and Jole, and for all the participants that made this session very valuable for us. One more thing I want to give you to give you as an outlook on the future. We already have the date finalized for second training session, which will focus on the step-by-step towards climate resilience, and have a very nice agenda and set of speakers. The EEA will present the adaptation support tool that I also presented in the initial slides, that can give guidance on the process of becoming climate resilience. And we also have the Transform R playbook as a block of presentations, so we will get an insight on this tool that has been developed in our sister project to develop climate resilience pathways, and include also the user experience, so that we don't come up with only a scientific approach. We already give an insight on what users of this playbook have experienced and how this supported them. So you can scan the QR code. We will send the invitation. You will receive an invitation for the next session. It's on the 21st of April from 11 to 1 CET. Yeah, and therefore I want to thank you, and I can initially pull up a final survey to get your feedback. That one that I announced in the beginning is focusing on what was your experience with today's session, and in the end you will also have the opportunity to vote on the topics for our upcoming event. It's now 2 minutes past 12, so I don't want to keep you here for too long. And I thank you again for the attention. This survey will be open for the next week or so you can provide us your feedback now or in the next upcoming days. So, thank you, and have a good lunch break or an upcoming meeting, and a productive day, and see you again on our journeys towards climate resilience. Thank you.